Regardless if we're coming this from a coach or athlete perspective, the first step in writing a training program is knowing what the intended goal is. If we don't know what the outputs are, then we're not going to be able to provide the correct inputs. Inputs being training stress, the stimulus that will result in the adaptation. So we're going to ask ourselves a few questions. 1, what physical adaptation are we trying to yield? 2, what are the rules that we use to create that adaptation? And 3, what exercise tool will we then implement? So we basically need to know, this is what we're trying to get. This is how we get it. This is what we'll use to create that system, to create that situation that will result in that adaptation. Remember, progress in the gym isn't so much about, let's say, nailing a bunch of wood together. It's building a garden bed, providing the nutrients, providing the sunlight, providing the water, providing the environment, and then the plant will grow at its own pace. We need to know what fertilizer to use. We need to know what environment produces or allows for the development of certain qualities. So let's get into it. Let's say the physical adaptation we're trying to get is muscle mass. What are the rules that create muscle mass? Well, we're all going to use the bench press as an example here, but the rules that would create muscle mass using a bench press would be training close to failure, good range of motion, a range of motion that is suited to you, the person. That means some people with a wider grip, some people with a closer grip, some people all the way down to the chest, other people even further down from the chest, other folks nowhere near the chest. Some standardization. We want most repetitions to be highly stimulating, and we want most of them to be the same, because usually in a hypertrophy program, the ability to add reps over time is an indication that you are growing muscle mass. And so we need the technique to remain the same, standardized, so that we can reveal the progress we're making in the gym by having those weights and reps go up over time. And we're looking for acute overload. Acute overload is different from progressive. Acute overload is providing, or a bench press that would provide a suitable stimulus in that training session to then cause muscle growth to happen. So that's the rules. Train close to failure, suitable range of motion for you, some standardization of the technique, and a heavy or hard enough session that we can overload or provide stimulus to the body in that given session. How are we going to execute that bench? Well, we're probably going to pick a flatter bench press or a bench press that works with your full range of motion. We're not going to be arching so much. We're not going to take too much room off the scapula. Why wouldn't we do that? If I set my scapula really far back, my pec has now lengthened, but my arm has not lowered the weight. And so I've created length at my pec, but I have not placed any load on my pec. So I would rather start in a neutral position, where as my arms come down, the pec is elongating and the load has loaded through the entire length of my pec. My pec is lengthened, there's load present during that whole lengthening phase and then the whole shortening phase. If I retract my scapula, my pecs have already used some length, but it's passive. I didn't load it with the barbell. And so when I come down, there's certain parts of my pec that aren't loaded. And when I press, certain parts of my pec don't fully contract because I've artificially taken some length off my pecs. I probably want to control the descent of this hypertrophy bench with my pecs. I actually want to regulate the humerus or regulate the arm stiffness, the descent of the rep with my chest. And so I won't just be tightening up, dropping it and pushing it. I'll be controlling the descent and trying to eke out some stimulus on the descent of that rep as well. I'm probably going to have a set cadence. So I'm going to have a rhythm to the exercise. Whether it's a 1, 2, 3 push, and then I'm going to try to standardize that rhythm over every single rep. And I might care about the mind-muscle connection. I might care about a position, slightly tweaking my elbows to get more feeling, more sensation, and more guidance and drive through that pec. That is the execution that I'm going to worry about to develop a bench press that most suits growing as much muscle as humanly possible. What exercise would I use? Well, any bench that allows for a full range of motion that suits me and allows me to train close to failure, get a good range of motion, have some eccentric or control on the down phase, establish my set rhythm, and have good mind-muscle connection for me. Now, for some people, that means they might have to use a cambered bar, which is a barbell which has a little bit of a divot in it, which allows you to go further down. For other people, that might be using a different machine or something like that altogether. For other folks, they may just use a barbell and not come all the way to their chest. The good thing about hypertrophy training or bodybuilding training is that it doesn't matter what tool you're using as long as it's checking off those exercise execution rules. Training close to failure, full range of motion, all that good stuff. That's if we're training for muscle mass. What if we're training for general strength? How do things differ? We're going to define general strength as getting stronger for the sake of becoming stronger at everything, right? So you get stronger at this one thing, and that's going to make you better at pushing someone over. That's going to make you better at a dumbbell bench or a dip. That's going to be making you better at any task which requires pushing. We probably want a transmittable range of motion. So what I mean by that is if I'm going super deep down and developing a lot of strength there, but it is drastically reducing how much load I'm actually lifting, that range of motion isn't going to transmit to my sport task or the other tasks that I'm interested in as much as just a good full range of motion bench press that isn't considerably weaker if I go super deep, vice versa. If I do a powerlifting bench and I arch as much as possible and I'm taking some range off of that lift, then I may not actually be getting any powerful developmental qualities from that lift. I'm not growing as much pecs because I'm taking so much range of motion off. So I just want a bench press that is like a decent range of motion, nice and full, not too deep, not too shallow. I probably want to do some targeted execution. And that means for my general strength execution for the bench press, I want to actually do it so it loads the down phase. I want to load a quick turnover at the bottom where the bar comes down to when it then returns and starts going back up. And I want to probably program it, or the rules that I would want to probably program in general strength form are more based on percentages and not just training close to failure. I probably have a bit of a reason for training at each percentage. I'm not going to go through that in this video. How am I going to execute that bench? Well, I probably want a nice firm setup. I want to be able to transmit all those forces effectively. I don't want to arch too much. I don't want to take too much room off that. So I just want a couple of things ready to go. A little bit of tightness, a little bit of chest up, and nice firm feet. I want strong resets at the top of each rep. I probably want to breathe and get ready for another maximal effort between each rep. I probably want to descend quickly, and I don't want to pause. I want to get it right off the chest and back moving again. And I want that lift to be very effort focused, very intentional focused. Probably going to yell at someone or get some support or get someone close by that can spot you so you can really put some effort into that bench. What exercise will we pick? Well, we can use the bench press, but we can use any single bench press ever. You can use a big thick axle, you can use a chest machine, you can use a mixed or a football bar, a cambered bar, you can use any implement you want, because as long as we've got a firm setup, strong resets, and we have a good range of motion, then we're going to be able to elicit strength adaptation from that version of the bench. Now, let me show you two pictures. This one here is an example of a general strength bench. Well, this guy's got a little bit of a pad in there to reduce the range of motion to a more suited range of motion for him. But flat feet, not arching too much, firm, nice and tight on that bench. And we're moving with a big axle bar rather than a regular bar. It's going to further reduce range of motion and change the way that some of the shoulder mechanics kind of work. You've got a spotter around there so that you can produce even more force and get even more force exposure on that bar. And that's what we're really doing when we're developing strength. We have to expose ourselves to high forces. And so all of these little tools and tweaks are there to help this man lift heavier weight, which will then allow him to produce more force in other situations. That is a very different rule set from the one that we use to grow muscle mass. Does it mean the general strength training bench won't grow muscle mass? Of course it does. Does it mean that the muscle mass orientated bench press doesn't make you stronger? Of course it does. It just has a heavy bias towards one of those qualities or another. Let's talk power benching. So let's say you're using the bench press to actually develop some power capabilities. For those of you who haven't heard this before, power is force times velocity. So it's also the speed the things are moving at. And so we want to learn to accelerate static objects. That's what we develop when we do power training. We want to just pick a range of motion that suits you. We want it to be very, very effort focused, move the thing as hard as we can. We either want to probably there's multiple ways to do this, but we can increase speed at a set weight, or we can do a heavier weight but try to match like a speed or something like that. It will be very eccentric and turnover focused. So it's very much getting out of the bottom, turning the down phase to an up phase very quickly. And it's also about being able to absorb the force on the way down quick enough that we can actually rebound out of the bottom and get a stronger up phase as well. that is going to be a whole other type of strength that we don't usually train in most normal kind of gym exercises, because the down phases are usually controlled. Being able to absorb load quickly on the way down is a very different bench. That means people are going to look like they're dumping the bar on their chest as quickly as possible. It can look quite dangerous, which is why when we're doing power movements, we want the movements to be relatively stable and safe. Okay, so how do we execute this? We just make it secure as hell and we send it with maximal effort. That's it. Probably. Now, what exercise would we use? We're probably going to use like a Smith machine, maybe a machine, and maybe add some chains and some bands so that there's some resistance deaccelerating us at the top. Power bench just looks like that, as quick as humanly possible, usually with sub-maximal weights. Well, almost always with sub-maximal weights. So we have 3 types of bench presses so far. The physical adaptation for muscle mass, controlled, close to failure, full range of motion. General strength, heavy, suitable range of motion, lots of effort, moving weight, very firm, high loads. Power training, lighter loads as quick as humanly possible. And then let's talk about the powerlifting bench. So, the powerlifting bench, what are the rules? Well, we're going to adhere to a progression model, which means the bench press workout is going to fit somewhere in a bigger program. It's not just going to be how we're going to program it for that day. It has to fit into the larger narrative of a peak, a developmental block, whatever it may be. It is a skill-focused task, so it's not so much about adhering to all these other rules. Most people, when they're benching, they're just trying to get better at the bench press skill. That allows them to use more weight. That's completely different from the other ones, where all the other ones are there to try to elicit adaptation. Powerlifting was trying to elicit an adaptation from the bench, but we're trying to get better at the task. There might be some top end and baseline development. I'm not going to go through that here. There's going to be a heavily reduced range of motion for most lifters. It can be less transmissible because of this, which means if you get really strong at a powerlifting bench, that doesn't mean you're going to get grossly strong at all other versions of the bench press. In fact, it might make you a lot better at the powerlifting bench depending on your build, but then not that good at a dumbbell bench. Whereas for the general strength bench, it's going to get you strong there and it will transmit to other lifts. And it's going to be very progressive overload focused. Powerlifting is a sport of putting more weight on the bar. That is going to be the priority of how you program and set up the rules for that powerlifting bench. How do we execute it? Well, if we're trying to get development out of the powerlifting bench, we're probably going to use another lift unless you've got very long arms and not much of an arch. We're going to pick the strongest range of motion for you possible, the strongest elbow, wrist position, rib position, foot position, everything. The strongest position wins. And we're going to train usually via percentage or by RPE. And so we're going to have it fill into a program. What exercise are we going to use? There's only one. It's an IPF approved barbell, competition bench press style, with a pause, with a press command, with a lockout at the top. Now, this video, actually I got some pictures here. This is how we do like a physique building bench. This guy's got a closer grip, must suit him. He's got a nice flat, good range of motion, nice long arms. You can see how long that bar is going to come down. That's how we would do a hypertrophy orientated bench. How we would do a powerlifting bench. We have the strongest foot position here, reduce the range of motion by having a very high arch and a very high rib cage. We're going to pause at the bottom, and then he's going to get a press command at the bottom, and then lockout. General strength bench, a bit flatter, firm, set up, very tight. Has some things in common with both other styles of bench press. Not really worrying about what sort of bar we're using, and just trying to move the weight with as high force exposure as possible. You have 4 different physical attributes that you can elicit in this example: muscle mass, general strength, power, and powerlifting. All of them is going to bench press differently. All of them have different rules that guide how to actually train for those things and how we're going to execute those lifts from the muscle mass standpoint, being close to failure, full range of motion, mind-muscle connection, cadence. For general strength, firm setup, strong resets, quicker execution, effort focus. For power, lots of security, maximal speed. And for powerlifting, to develop the skill to be perfect with our repetition, just like shooting a jump shot. These are all completely different mental spaces and completely different executions. So when you see people doing an alternate way or a variety of ways when they're training, just be clear. Unless we know what we're training for or what that person's training for, we don't know how it fits into their goals. And so there's many ways to do things. Here's a few examples. That goes for every other type of lift in the gym as well.